We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday. Professor Thomas Schwartz is with us from Vanderbilt. Nice to have you on, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Taking phone calls, comments. We talk presidential politics, things happening in Washington, D.C. Lots of ground to cover. And we've actually got Joe wants to weigh in on a few things. So good morning to you, Joe.
Good morning, Nick.
Hi.
Just listening to your stories this morning.
Yeah.
But just a couple of comments. I think you're exactly right with all the Trump dealings that's going on in Washington. They're working on the 2020 election already with all this stuff. But I think one thing that people in America forget, the rest of the world is looking at a lot of this politics in the United States and what a mess it's in. We've got a whole lot of problems in the rest of the world with a lot of countries that we need to be worried about. And I think we're spending, a whole lot of time, too much time really, with all this back and forth in Washington, which is just a little game for these folks, it looks like. I've lost faith pretty well in politicians in general, Democrats and Republicans, because you can't really get the truth out of none of them, it seems like. So that's my comment.
Listen, I appreciate it. You think Joe's typical of a lot of the public out there?
I actually do. I think there's a lot of people who really are turned off by the sort of spectacle. What he says about the rest of the world is, I do think, something that is affecting the appeal of the United States. The idea our politics are very dysfunctional, and that to some extent make some of these other authoritarian leaders look good because they're able to just do things and not be bothered. But I mean, part of the messiness of our political process is that there's investigations and back and forth and all that. But I have a feeling that his general feeling of being turned off by politics is one that's shared by a lot of people these days.
Gotcha. All right, let's go to Taylor next. Hi, Taylor. Good morning to you. You got in here. What do you got to say, my friend?
You talking to me there, young man?
I am, Taylor. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Nick, and good morning to the professor.
Good morning.
This is an ongoing story for the last 2.5 years, and looks like we're going to do it for another year and a half. And I might say that I suppose there's other news going on in the world.
Yep.
But I am becoming so turned off by what's happening in Washington and what's happening to the cable news networks. You just can't get any stories beyond this one, and I think we're really losing out on that part. Now, back to the main story. Barr, I think, is like all attorney generals. Every president appoints the attorney general, so it's not like this one is unique to this particular president.
That's true.
I think he's trying to do the right thing for both sides, and he is not there to be the prosecutor of the president. He's just there supposedly kind of like a referee calling balls and strikes. But let's not forget, he is the Attorney General, and Mueller works under him. Mueller's reputation comes mainly from being with the FBI in his day, and not as much as attorney representing the law. And let's also not forget, although it will happen, it's only been the Judicial Committee that has voted to penalize him, not the full House, but that will happen. But again, the whole story, good, bad, and otherwise, is just poisoning more and more both sides, and I think the networks, to build an audience, has kept all this going for ratings, but it's sure not helping the mindset of the American public, young, old, otherwise. So I'm really disappointed in what's going on. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
I appreciate it. It's tricky because I hear what he's saying, and in terms of ratings or whatever, I mean, if he's correct and people like Taylor are turned off by it, and I think a lot of people are, I don't know how that does for ratings, but on the other hand, it's a balance. I mean, it's kind of like you're covering news, and you have to cover some of these issues. I guess the trick is sorting through it and trying to, when you do a news story, find out what's partisan and what's not. What is the real important issue? Was there collusion? Was a foreign power involved in our elections? That's a huge story if that was to ever be proven. And to some degree it was, whether or not the president was. We know Russia was messing with our election. That's a given, and that's a huge story. Now, pushing how much one side or the other was involved with it, that gets political. And so I don't know. I mean, you can't just say, well, you know what, there's a lot of this, but there's other things we got to do. Let's just ignore all this, some of which could be real legitimate news. How do you decide?
Well, to some extent, there's a certain fatigue that's set in about this. That it just keeps going on.
One thing after another, too.
Yeah, and I do think. I mean, Congress's approval ratings are lower than the president's. And Congress, the sense that the Congress, there are problems like immigration that are not being tackled because there's just this problem is there. And I think that you could make the case that Congress could do itself a lot of good is if it actually was focused on actually achieving or adopting something, not just investigating. That they could do more than one thing at once, but it does not seem to be the case either.
Yeah, it's funny. We haven't heard much about the wall lately.
No, we haven't. Although last night the president was talking again about it.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, he'll always get back to some, but just not a lot of. And it's probably because of all this other stuff going on. Yeah. And there's so much now. Other serious issues. You talked about, some of these dictators out there, and North Korea. You saw overnight launched another missile. Okay, it wasn't a detonation of a nuclear weapon test, but I mean, it's just crazy. They keep doing this, and our president went and visited. And initially, I was open to the idea no one's ever done it before because this guy's such a bad dude. I'm talking about Kim Jong-un. He goes, and if there had been a nuclear agreement of some type, okay, but maybe he hasn't tested the bombs, but he's figuring out how to deliver them. All I see those meetings having done is legitimizing North Korea to some degree, to the point where they just recently met with Russia. I mean, I think we got the raw end of the deal on that.
I think the jury's still out, because I do think one of the things that is happening, and one of the reasons he's testing the missiles, is the sanctions are having more of an effect. And there is this argument that they're really having serious economic issues.
Well, I thought they always have. I mean, supposedly North Korea is awful.
Right.
Okay, yeah, sure. The leadership scumbags, which is what they are, eat well where everyone else starves. Right. But I mean, North Korea, I'd love to visit it to see, because I just heard it's terrible. How can it be any worse? Well, apparently they have enough money to build weapons, and that's where it all goes.
Yeah, and that's the issue. Now, a lot of this is being handled. The thing we're not seeing as much focused on is that South Korea is dealing with North Korea, and the South Koreans actually recently had started sending more humanitarian aid because of conditions in the north. So there does seem to be something else going on here. The South Korea has always been really important in pushing Trump to engage the North. I mean, the South Korean regime, the South Korean government, democratically elected government, they want it. They actually think there's possibilities there. So that's why I'm sort of less certain that this is going to go bad, because I think the South Koreans have taken the lead on this, and until I see them changing their mind on it, I'm not as quick to feel like it's going to fail.
Well, they're the ones greatest at risk.
That
launch that went overnight was these missiles that could go anywhere into South Korea.
All right.
And so, well, I guess I can see where they're from. It's just, giving any credibility to North Korea, which deserves none, is a problem for me. Right. I mean, that guy is a monster. And the way he's portrayed when he takes his stupid little train to go visit people, and the guy's a monster. Period. End of story. If you think there's anything good about North Korea, there's something wrong with you. And I don't trust him. And I think he's bad for security of the planet. And I think he's horrible at the way he treats his own people. Right. There's just no debating any of that. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more of your phone calls right after this.